not nothing, what the Buddha actually said about Nibbāna. The word nirvana means literally going out, the going out of a fire, not the destruction of a fire, the going out of one. There is a difference, and the whole of tonight turns on it. A flame that has gone out has not been killed. It has not been banished somewhere. Nothing has been annihilated. The conditions that kept it burning, the fuel, the heat, the reaching, simply ceased, and the fire, which was never quite a thing so much as a process, stopped. That is the word the Buddha chose. He could have chosen any word. He chose this one. Most people, when they hear it, picture the opposite. They picture vanishing, dissolving, being swallowed into some vast everything, or fading into nothing at all. The candle snuffed, the person erased. And so they either long for it or quietly fear it, and in both cases they have misunderstood it. The Buddha said something stranger and far more careful. He said, there is an unborn, an unbecome, an unmade, an unfabricated, UD 8.3. He said there is. And then, almost everywhere he was asked, he declined to tell us what it is. Tonight, what that refusal means, and why it is not evasion, but precision, because for 24 videos, everything has been pointing here. The diagnosis of why life aches, the shape of the path, what we are not, what ends, and what does not end. Each one was, in its own way, an approach to a single far shore. Tonight we arrive. Chapter 1. Not nothing. Let us begin where the Buddha himself often began, not by saying what a thing is, but by clearing away what it is not. In one of the longest and most architectural of his discourses, the Brahmajala Sutta DN1, the Buddha lays out the landscape of every position a human mind had taken or could take about the ultimate fate of a person. He sorts them, and among them, two great families of belief stand out, the two that nearly everyone, then and now, falls into without noticing they have fallen. The first he called uccheda vada, the doctrine of annihilation. It says, when the body dies, that is the end. The person is extinguished, cut off, gone. Nothing remains. For some, this is a despair. For others, strangely, a comfort. The second he called sassata, the doctrine of eternity. It says, there is something in you, a soul, a self, a true essence, that was never born and will never die, and that survives every death intact forever. For most of human history, across most of the world, this has been the consoling answer. Annihilation or eternity, nothing or forever. And here is the first surprising thing. The Buddha rejected both. Not one, both. This is where most people lose the thread. So let us go slowly. It is easy to assume that if he rejected annihilation, he must have been teaching some version of the eternal soul. And if he rejected the eternal soul, he must secretly have meant annihilation after all. The mind wants him on one team or the other. He would not stand on either. And the reason is not that he thought the answer was simply unknowable, some mystery too deep to reach. The reason is subtler, and it is the hinge of everything that follows. He pointed out that both questions, will I be annihilated, and will I live forever, quietly smuggle in an assumption before they are even asked. They both assume there is an I, a fixed self, sitting there waiting to find out its fate. A self that could either be snuffed out or carried on. And that self, on careful and honest examination, the examination we have spent so many of these nights doing together, was never quite there to begin with. So the Buddha did not answer the question. He dismantled the questioner, neither nothing nor eternal being, something the available words were not built to hold. Now, hold that frame and let us turn to fire. There is a discourse so vivid, it is simply called the Fire Sermon. The Adittapariyaya, SN 35.28. The Buddha is said to have delivered it to 1,000 former fire worshippers, ascetics who had spent their lives tending sacred flames. And to them, of all audiences, he says, everything is burning. The eye is burning. What the eye sees is burning. The ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind, all of it burning. Burning with what? With 3 fires, he says. The fire of raga, passion, the grasping, the wanting, the reaching toward. The fire of dosa, aversion, the pushing away, the resentment, the recoil. And the fire of moha, delusion, the not seeing clearly that lets the first 2 run unchecked. Passion, aversion, delusion. 3 fires. According to the Buddha, this is what an ordinary human life is, moment to moment. A quiet, continuous burning. Not always dramatic. Often so habitual we mistake it for simply being awake. But burning. Here a careful note, because this audience does not like to be sold a tidy story, and is right not to. The scholar Richard Gombrich has argued that the Buddha's choice of fire was not casual at all, that those 3 fires were a deliberate, almost ironic echo of the 3 sacred fires a Brahmin householder of the time was required, by religious duty, to keep perpetually lit. Where his culture said keep these 3 fires burning, the Buddha said, let these 3 fires go out. It is an elegant reading. It is also contested. The historian Johannes Bronkhorst has challenged how much of early Buddhism really formed in answer to that Brahmanical world at all. We do not need to settle it tonight, and we will not pretend to. The historical claim is Gombrich's. The metaphor itself needs no scholar to defend it, because the metaphor is doing the real work, and it is doing the work that the word nirvana promised at the very start. If a human life is a burning, then the going out of a fire is not the going out of the life. Hear that again, because the whole misunderstanding lives in this sentence. What needs to go out is not you, not your breath, not your days, not your capacity for joy. What needs to go out is the passion, the aversion, and the delusion that have been quietly consuming you the whole time. Nibbāna is not the snuffing of the person. It is the cooling of the fever. And now we can begin to feel why neither nothing nor forever fit. When a fire goes out, where does it go? It does not travel north. It is not stored in a jar, but neither is it nothing. The calm that follows it is real. The room is genuinely cooler. The burning has genuinely stopped. The fire's going out is not an absence pretending to be a presence. It is a real change of state into a condition the language of where did it go was simply never built to describe. The Buddha gestured at that condition directly, in the most spatially strange of his sayings. There is that dimension, he said, where there is neither earth nor water nor fire nor wind, neither coming nor going nor staying, unestablished, unevolving, without support. This, just this, is the end of stress, UD 8.1. Notice what he does even here, at the edge of language. He piles up the negations, no earth, no water, no coming, no going. And then he lands, deliberately, on something positive, the end of stress, the relief. He will do this again and again, and we should learn to watch for it, because it is the single most important discipline in reading him honestly. Every time he tells you what Nibbāna is not, he reaches, before he is done, for what it is, which brings us to the sentence at the center of this entire video, the one we opened with, and the one we will close with. It is short. It is from the Udana, the collected utterances, UD 8.3, and in the Pali it runs, Ati, Bhikkhave, Ajatam, Abhutam, Akatam, Asankhatam. There is, monks, an unborn, an unbecome, an unmade, an unfabricated. And then, this is the part almost everyone misses. He tells you why he is bothering to say so. He does not leave it as a mystical flourish. He builds an argument. If there were not that unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated, he says, there would be no escape discernible from the born, the become, the made, the fabricated. But precisely because there is an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated, escape from the born, become, made, fabricated, is discerned. Sit with the shape of that. It is not a poet describing a vision. It is closer to a logician noting a necessity. The reasoning runs. You can see, plainly, that there is a way out of the burning. The whole path the Buddha taught is evidence that the fever can break, but a way out requires somewhere that is genuinely outside. If absolutely everything were conditioned, born, made, kept alive by fuel, then there would be nowhere the fire was not, and escape would be an empty word. The very fact that release is possible requires that there be something unconditioned for release to arrive at. So the claim there is an unborn is not, in the first place, a description of a heaven or a mystical realm. It is a structural claim about the architecture of freedom itself. There is a far shore, not because someone reported seeing it, but because there is a shore we are leaving, and you cannot leave a shore for open water with no other land anywhere in existence. Not nothing then. The Buddha was explicit. There is. And before we leave this chapter, one distinction we must make exactly once, cleanly, because nearly every confusion about Nibbāna grows from blurring it. The Buddha taught 3 marks of existence: sabbe sankhara, anicca. All fabrications, all conditioned things are impermanent. Sabbe sankhara dukkha. All fabrications are stressful, unsatisfactory, unable to bear the weight we put on them. And third, with a deliberately different word, sabbe dhamma anatta. All phenomena are not self. Watch the change. The first 2 marks speak of sankhara, the fabricated, the conditioned, the things that arise and pass. The third widens to Dhamma, all phenomena, without exception. And Nibbāna is a sankhata, the unconditioned. So it stands outside the first 2 marks entirely. Nibbāna is not impermanent, and it is not stressful. It does not arise and it does not decay, but it is still not self. There is no hidden you to be found waiting there, and no great self to merge into and become. The far shore is real, and it is empty of the one thing we keep hoping to smuggle across the water with us, neither nothing nor eternal being, neither annihilation nor a soul that survives forever, something else, something the fire words and the soul words were never made to hold. That is what we have come to look at. Chapter 2: The Fires and the Embers. Before we go further toward that far shore, it is worth pausing to notice that you already hold in your hands almost everything you need to understand it. The Buddha did not hide Nibbāna at the end of a secret teaching. He left a map in plain sight, and every major landmark on that map is a description of the same far shore seen from a different road. Let me lay the map out, quickly, plainly, because seeing it whole is itself a kind of arrival. He began with a diagnosis. The first of his 4 noble truths simply names the condition, dukkha, that life lived from the burning carries a built-in friction, an ache that no rearrangement of circumstances ever fully cures. That is the illness. But the truths do not stop at diagnosis. The third truth makes a promise that this ache has a cessation, a nirodha, a place where it stops. And the fourth names the path that leads there. Diagnosis, promise, path. Nibbāna is the content of that third promise, the cessation itself. And what kind of path leads to it? Not punishment of the body, the Buddha said, and not indulgence of it, not starving yourself toward holiness, and not drowning yourself in comfort. The way to the cooling of the fires is the middle way, the path that refuses both extremes, because both extremes are just two more ways of feeding a fire. Along that path, he asked us to look closely at what we are, and to notice that none of the things we call myself survive the looking. The body, the feelings, the perceptions, the mental fabrications, the very consciousness reading these words. None of these, he said, is to be regarded as me, as mine, or as what I am. Not because you are nothing, but because the thing you keep reaching for as a solid, own self is not in any of the parts. That path has a structure, 8 factors, the Noble Eightfold Path, from right view through right intention, speech, action, and livelihood, to right effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Think of it as the vehicle. Nibbāna is the far shore. The path is the boat that crosses to it. And what exactly is being crossed out of? The Buddha mapped that too. A chain of 12 links describing how a burning life keeps regenerating itself. Link feeding link. Ignorance at the root. Nibbāna is what happens when that chain is cut, and cut not in the middle, but at the root, where not seeing clearly gives the whole machine its first turn. There. That is the map. Diagnosis, path, the dismantling of the self we cling to, the vehicle, the chain that is broken. 5 landmarks, and every one of them is pointing at the same place. We are simply, tonight, walking up to it directly. Now, a question that sounds simple and is not. When does the fire go out? At death or before? This matters more than it seems, because the answer corrects the single most common picture people carry. That Nibbāna is something that happens to you only after you die, a reward at the end, a destination you reach by leaving. The Buddha was precise about this, and he drew a line straight through the middle of it. In a short, clean discourse from the Itivuttaka, Iti 44, he distinguished 2 kinds, 2 properties of unbinding. The first he called the unbinding property with fuel remaining. In the Pali, sa-upādisesa. This is the living awakened one, the arahant, someone in whom the 3 fires, passion, aversion, delusion, have genuinely gone out completely, with no possibility of return. And yet, here is the part that reorders everything. The person is still here, still breathing, still walking the road, eating the meal, feeling the sun warm and the thorn sharp. The aggregates remain. The body still registers pleasure and pain, because a body that registers nothing is a corpse, and the arahant is not a corpse. The arahant ages, gets tired. The arahant will one day die. Thanissaro Bhikkhu gives the image its exact weight. In the first case, he says, the flames are out, but the embers are still glowing. Sit with that picture, because it is the heart of this chapter. The flames are out, but the embers are still glowing. The violent, consuming part of the fire, the part that leaps and grasps and burns whatever it touches, that is gone. What remains is warm, settled, harmless. A life still lived, still felt, still fully present in the world, but no longer driven by the wanting, the recoiling, the confusion that drove it before. And this living condition, fires out, but life continuing. This is what the Buddha is usually talking about when he uses the word Nibbāna. not a posthumous heaven, not a state you can only enter by dying. The overwhelming majority of the time, in discourse after discourse, the nibbana under discussion is something a person attains while alive and then lives inside, sometimes for decades. The Buddha himself, by his own account, reached it at 35 and walked the roads of northern India, teaching from inside it for 45 years. He ate, he grew old. His back ached in his final years, and he said so plainly. The embers glowed the whole time. The flames never came back. So when we ask what is nibbana, we should hear, underneath the grand metaphysical version of the question, a much closer and warmer one. What would it be like to live your ordinary, embodied, aging life? This one, the one you are in, with the fever simply gone. To still feel everything, lose nothing of your humanity, and yet move through it all without the grasping and the dread that have been burning quietly beneath every moment. That is not a reward for after you die. According to the Buddha, that is available on this side of the water. And the second kind? The second he called the unbinding property with no fuel remaining, anupadisesa. This is what comes at the death of one in whom the fires are already out. And here the Buddha's language is so quiet, it is almost easy to miss what it refuses to do. He does not describe a soul rising, or a light departing, or a self arriving anywhere. He says only this, that for such a one, all that is sensed, not being relished, will grow cold right here, will grow cold right here. Not banished, not destroyed in some violent erasure, grown cold, the way embers, long after the flame is gone, finally lose the last of their warmth and become, simply, still. Thanissaro completes his image. In the first case, the embers still glow. In the second, the fire is so thoroughly out that even the embers have gone cold. I want to be careful here, because we are touching the thing that frightens people, and most of this audience has begun, honestly, to think about it. The temptation is to hear grow cold as bleak, as the lights going out, the long nothing. But notice that the Buddha is not describing the death of an ordinary burning person clinging to life. He is describing the death of someone in whom the clinging was already gone, years before the body stopped. For such a one, death is not a catastrophe that interrupts a life mid-grasp. It is the last ember of a fire that was already, peacefully, almost out. There is nothing left in them that is fighting it, nothing reaching. The completion is gentle precisely because the burning ended long ago. That is why the Buddha never spoke of the arahant's death as a tragedy, and never as a triumphant escape either. He spoke of it the way you might speak of a fire that has done its work and quietly settled into dark. Not a loss, not a victory, a resolution. So we have two faces of the same going out. The flames out, the embers warm, a life fully lived without the fever. The embers cold, that same life complete. In both, the same three fires have ceased. In neither has a person been annihilated, and in neither has a soul flown off to live forever somewhere else, which leaves us with a strange and lovely problem. If the Buddha would not say Nibbāna is nothing, and would not say it is eternal being, if he kept refusing the words we reach for, then did he give us any words for it at all? He did, more than 30 of them. Chapter 3, More than 30 Names. The Buddha refused to tell us what Nibbāna is. On that, he was immovable. But he was strikingly generous about what he was willing to call it. Gathered in one corner of the canon is a whole collection of discourses, the Asankata Samyutta, the connected sayings on the unconditioned SN 43, in which the Buddha simply offers name after name for the same far shore. More than 30 names appear there. Not definitions, names. The way you might, unable to capture a person in a single sentence, instead say, "Here is what she was to me, and here, circling the truth with images because no one image will hold it. This is the via negativa relenting, just a little. Having told us, again and again, what Nibbāna is not born, not made, not this, not that, the Buddha turns and tells us what it is like. And the names are not bleak. That is the thing to notice tonight. A teaching this fierce about impermanence and not self might be expected to point towards something austere, something cold. It does the opposite. The names are warm. They are the vocabulary of someone arriving home. But before we let them lift us, we need an anchor. Because beautiful names are exactly where this teaching is most easily misunderstood, floated up into vague mysticism, turned into a sunlit everything that the Buddha never described. So let us fix the anchor first and keep returning to it. There is a short exchange, SN 38.1. A wanderer named Jambukadaka comes to the Buddha's great disciple Sariputta and asks him, plainly, the question this whole video is built around. Nibbāna, Nibbāna, it is said. Friend, what is this Nibbāna? And Sariputta does not reach for the sky. He answers with almost startling concreteness. The destruction of passion, the destruction of aversion, the destruction of delusion. This, friend, is called Nibbāna. There it is. The three fires again, and they're going out. Whatever else Nibbāna is named, this is what it is. The end of the burning. Hold that. Every time one of these lovely names threatens to drift off into a fog of cosmic feeling, Sariputta's plain sentence pulls us back to the ground. Nibbāna is the destruction of passion, aversion, and delusion, not a place in the clouds, the cooling of a specific fever. Now, with that anchor held, let the names come. He called it the island. SN43. Picture what that word means to someone being carried along in a flood, swept in a current they did not choose and cannot stop. An island is the one place the current cannot reach, solid ground in the middle of being swept away. But notice, and here is Sariputta tugging the rope, it is not an island you escape to in order to be safe forever as the same frightened self. It is the ground that appears when the flood itself, the flood of passion and aversion and delusion, simply runs dry. He called it the shelter and the refuge, the place of no danger. Again, the warmth of it is real. Somewhere the relentless exposure of an ordinary life, the way we are forever a little bit braced against the next loss, finally eases. And again, the anchor. The danger that ends is not the danger of living. It is the danger we manufacture ourselves, breath by breath, out of wanting and recoiling. Take away the three fires and you have taken away the thing that made every shelter temporary. He called it the far shore, para. This may be the oldest image of all, older than Buddhism. The near bank where we stand, troubled, and the farther bank, at peace, and the water between. We have used it already tonight. The path is the boat. Nibbāna is the far shore. But hear the discipline in it. You do not drag the whole burning cargo across. The far shore is reached by setting things down, not by carrying them over. What arrives is not the fevered traveler triumphant. What arrives is someone in whom the fever has already gone out. He called it the deathless, Unbecome, and this is the name that asks for the most care, because it is the easiest to misread as eternal life, the soul that lives forever. Exactly the eternalism the Buddha rejected in the first chapter. So let Sariputta hold the line hard here. Unbecome does not promise that you go on without end. It names the going out of what dies, the cessation of the very process of becoming and perishing, that the three fires keep turning, not a self that never dies, the ending of the machinery of death itself. There is a difference, and the whole honesty of the teaching lives inside it. He called it peace, santi. Here, perhaps, the names need the least translation. Everyone listening knows the difference between a mind at war with itself and a mind at rest. Santi is simply that rest made total and made permanent, not the lull between two anxieties, but the condition in which the anxieties have no more fuel to start again. And among these names, he placed one that is stranger, more spatial, almost vertiginous, the one we touched in the first chapter. There is that dimension, he said, where there is neither earth, nor water, nor fire, nor wind, neither coming, nor going, nor staying, without support. UD 8.1. Read as a name, this too belongs on the list. Nibbāna as a dimension where none of the conditioned applies. The place, though place is already too much, where every coordinate we navigate by simply drops out. And even here, piling negation on negation, the Buddha will not leave us in the void. He lands the saying, you remember, on something plain and positive. This, just this, is the end of stress. Even the most abstract name resolves into relief, more than 30 of these. The island, the shelter, the far shore, the deathless, peace, the dimension without support, and 24 more besides, the subtle, the wonderful, the secure, the unafflicted, the pure. A man accused across the centuries of teaching a gloomy doctrine of nothingness left behind a vocabulary that reads, when you gather it, almost like a love letter to a freedom he could not otherwise name, and every single one of them rests on Sariputta's plain floor. The island, because the flood of craving has dried, the shelter, because the self-made danger has ceased, peace, because the war of passion and aversion is over. Take away the destruction of the three fires, and not one of these names means anything at all. They are not descriptions of a heaven. They are descriptions of what is left when the burning stops. And what is left, the Buddha insists, is not less than the burning life. It is incomparably more at ease. Let one verse close the chapter, because it gathers the whole positive face into a single line. In the Dhammapada, D, GH, P 203 to 204, the Buddha sets the ordinary human estimate of the good life against his own. Hunger, he says, that endless gnawing wanting, is the foremost illness, and fabrications, all this restless making and becoming, are the foremost pain. But then, for one who sees this as it actually is, unbinding is the foremost ease, not the foremost emptiness, not the foremost nothing, the foremost ease, the greatest rest available to a human being, named by the one who is supposed to have taught only renunciation as the highest happiness there is. So the names are warm, and the warmth is honest, and Sariputta keeps the warmth from floating away. And yet, for all this generosity of naming, there was one question the Buddha would not answer with any name at all. Not because he was hiding the answer, because he said the question itself was not well made. We turn to that question now. Chapter 4. The question that doesn't apply. There was a wanderer named Vacchagotta. He turns up more than once in the discourses, and he has a quality that makes him precious to us. He asks the questions we would actually ask. He is not a disciple angling for praise. He is a sharp, slightly frustrated outsider who keeps pressing for the one answer the Buddha keeps declining to give. And in the discourse called the Agavashagotta, MN72, the fire discourse to Vajragota, he finally presses on the exact point we have been circling all night. He wants to know about the awakened one, the Tathagata, after death. Does he exist? Does he not exist? Both? Neither? He lays out all four possibilities, the complete logical grid, leaving the Buddha nowhere to hide. Surely, you can feel him thinking, one of these four has to be true. The Buddha declines all four. Vajragota is exasperated and says so. He is at a loss. He is confused. The confidence he had in the Buddha is wavering. It is an honest reaction, and the Buddha does not scold it. Instead, he asks Vajra a question back. Suppose, he says, a fire were burning in front of you. Would you know that it was burning? Yes, says Vajra, I would. And suppose it went out. Would you know that it had gone out? Yes. And if someone asked you, and here the trap closes gently, which direction the fire went when it went out? East, west, north, south? What would you say? And Vajragota, who is no fool, says the only thing that can be said, that doesn't apply. The question doesn't fit. The fire burned in dependence on its fuel. When the fuel was gone, the fire is simply reckoned as out. To ask which way it went is to misunderstand what a fire was in the first place, in the very same way, says the Buddha. And this is the sentence the whole night has been moving toward. The Tathagata has let go of everything by which someone might be measured and described. The form, the feeling, the perception, the fabrications, the consciousness, all of it abandoned at the root, like a palm tree cut so it can never grow again. And so, the Tathagata, released, is, in the Pali, Gambhiro apameyo, duparyo galho, seyathapi mahasamuddo, deep, boundless, hard to fathom, like the sea. Let that image stand for a moment without my explaining it, because explanation would only shrink it. The ocean does not need a direction. You do not ask where the sea has gone, and you do not ask which way a flame travels once it has gone cool. The Buddha is not refusing to answer because the answer is a secret too high for us. He is showing Vajragota that the question has a broken assumption inside it. The same broken assumption we met in the first chapter. Does he exist or not after death still imagines a fixed someone, a self, who must be located somewhere on the map, and that self was the fire. When the fuel of clinging is gone, asking for its coordinates is not deep. It is simply a category mistake. Now, having seen the Buddha decline to describe it, we should be honest that even his greatest interpreters, reading the very same text with the very same care, have differed on what positively remains. And it would be a small dishonesty to flatten that disagreement, especially for you, who did not come here to be handed a tidy certainty. On one side stands the reading associated with Thanissaro Bhikkhu, whose translations have carried us through most of tonight. He points to a haunting phrase the canon uses in another context. DN11, Vijnanam Anidasanam, consciousness without surface, consciousness without feature, and reads Nibbāna as something closer to an unconditioned awareness, not the ordinary mind which arises and ceases, but an awareness with no object, no horizon, nothing it lands on, not a self. He is emphatic on that, but not a blank either. On the other side stands the reading associated with Bhikkhu Bodhi, the great scholar-translator of the same canon. He is wary of that move. To call Nibbāna a kind of consciousness, he cautions, risks smuggling the eternal self back in through a side door, dressing up sa theravada in subtler robes. For Bodhi, Nibbāna is best understood as the cessation of the five aggregates, utterly real, the highest goal, but not a luminous something we get to keep. It does not, in his careful phrase, point toward an all-embracing absolute. It is the going out, full stop. And the going out needs no metaphysical furniture to be the most worthwhile thing a person can reach. 2 serious monks, the same suttas, decades of practice and scholarship each, and a genuine divergence about the positive nature of the far shore. I am not going to tell you one of them is right, not because I am dodging, but because the Buddha himself, in this very discourse, already told us where this lands. The question doesn't apply. The fire is out. To ask whether consciousness without surface or cessation of the aggregates more accurately maps the territory may be to ask, once again, which direction the flame has gone. 2 thoughtful people standing on the near shore, describing a far shore neither has yet made into a concept, because by every account it cannot be made into one. There is a Pali word for exactly this property, atakavakaro, beyond the range of conjecture, outside the reach of reasoning. It is worth being precise about what it modifies. In its setting, it describes the released one, the nature of the Tathagata freed from all classification, the deep, sea-like condition of someone in whom the fire is out. It marks the limit where our thinking runs out of road. And the Buddha is telling us that limit is not a failure of our intelligence. It is a true feature of the thing. This is why, elsewhere, he simply set such questions aside, declared them undeclared. In the famous image, MN 63, he describes a man shot with a poisoned arrow who refuses to let the surgeon remove it until he first learns who shot him, and his caste, and his name, and the wood of the bow, and the feather of the shaft. The man dies mid-interrogation. The point is not that the questions have no answers. The point is that they do not heal the wound. The questions about the Tathagata's existence after death, the Buddha said, are not connected with the goal. They do not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to the cooling itself. And there is a deeper reason still, and it is the most honest thing in the whole canon on this subject. In 2 short piercing discourses, SN 44.1, SN 44.2, a nun named Khema and a monk named Anuradha are each pressed on the same point. What happens to the Tathagata after death? And each gives the same astonishing answer. We cannot even pin down the Tathagata here, in this very life standing in front of you. The awakened one cannot be located as the form or the feeling or anything you might point to and say there, that is him. And if he cannot be fixed and found even now, alive, then the question of his coordinates after death was never going to have an answer, because it never had a coherent subject. So the most truthful thing the Buddha ever said about Nibbāna after death was not a description. It was a correction of the question. The question is not well put, not evasion, not a locked door with something hidden behind it. Precision. The precision of a man who would rather leave you at the true edge of language than walk you one step past it into a comforting sentence that isn't so. Close. We began with a fire going out. Let us end with what the canon dares to say is left when it does. Because here, at the very end, the Buddha's reticence finally relaxes into its most generous language. In the last of the 4 parallel utterances on unbinding, UD 8.4, having once more cleared away everything born, become, made and fabricated, everything subject to aging and death, he turns, as he always turns, toward the positive. And he reaches farther than anywhere else in the canon. The escape from all of that, he says, is calm. It is permanent. It is the sorrowless, the stainless. It is the stilling of all fabrication. And then the single warmest word the Pali ever places on Nibbāna: bliss. The bliss of stilling, not the bliss of getting, not the bliss of becoming something grander. The deep ease of a fire that no longer has to burn. Hold that beside everything we have walked through tonight, and feel how far it is from nothingness. Think back over the road. The diagnosis told us why any of this matters. That an ordinary life, lived from the burning, carries an ache no rearrangement ever cures. The middle way told us what kind of path could lead out, neither starving the self, nor drowning it. Taking apart the 5 aggregates showed us that the self we were so afraid of losing was never solidly there to lose. The eightfold path was the vehicle, and dependent origination named the chain it carries us out of. Cut at the root, where not seeing clearly first turns the wheel. The marks of existence showed us what Nibbāna transcends. Impermanent and stressful are marks of the conditioned, and the unconditioned stands outside them, though even there no self is to be found. And loving kindness, of all things, turned out to be a doorway. Cultivate it, deepen it, and then turn the same clear seeing on the kindness itself. Even this is conditioned, even this is not mine, until the property of the deathless comes, at last, into range. 24 nights of preparation, and what they were preparing for was never a secret doctrine or a hidden reward. They were preparing us simply to stand here, at the water's edge, and look honestly at the far shore without needing to shrink it into a sentence. Neither nothing nor everything. Not the candle erased into the dark, and not a soul lifted up to live forever. Something the words for nothing and the words for forever were never built to hold. The island, the shelter, the deathless, the far shore, the foremost ease, the destruction of passion, the destruction of aversion, the destruction of delusion, and whatever, beyond the reach of conjecture, that destruction opens onto. The Buddha would not tell us what it is. He told us instead that it is. And he staked the entire possibility of freedom on that one quiet assertion. Because if there were nowhere outside the burning, there would be no out. And there is an out. He walked through it himself and lived on this side of the water for 45 more years, the embers warm, the flames long gone. So let the last word be his, in the form he gave it. The sentence we opened with, return to now, and left to stand on its own. There is, monks, an unborn, an unbecome, an unmade, an unfabricated. If there were not that unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated, there would be no escape discerned from the born, the become, the made, the fabricated. But precisely because there is an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated, escape is discerned.